Okay, welcome back. So we are on page Pei Vav in the Hebrew and 104 in the English of Shabbos Kodesh, Nefesh Shimshon. The chapter is entitled Talmid Chacham B'Bechinat Shabbat. Talmid Chacham is like Shabbos. What does that mean? Someone who's steeped in Torah has a Shabbos-like quality to them. So let's understand. We know already, as we've been establishing, that the temple, Beis HaMikdash, was a place of the Shechina, the divine presence, to exist. And when a Jew would go into the Beis HaMikdash, Afafa also Kedusha Mikol HaKivunim. So what would happen, it would like envelop that Kedusha from every direction. I think that's sort of how you would surrounded by Kedusha. Right, in every respect. Kachi Gam Shabbos Kodesh. Shabbos also surrounds you, envelops you with Kedusha like the Beis HaMikdash. This is what we've been establishing until now. That parallel between those many parallels between the Beis HaMikdash and Shabbos. Yesh hatmahim ma pesher beit hasoar sheyeshnu Shabbos. Some wonder, what is the explanation why we have to experience such a prison of Shabbos where we can't do anything, we're stuck. When I was little, I thought Shabbos, before I began to experience some of the beautiful side of Shabbos. So there was always this, remember the scene in the beginning of One of the Cat in the Hats where they're stuck in the rainy day and they're in the house? Like that's Shabbos, right? Like you can't do anything, especially in the winter here in Chicago. We're just stuck here. We can't do anything. What are we supposed to do? So it feels sometimes like a prison. Shekimat the Efshar Lazuz b'yom. You can't do anything. You can't go to the movies. I can't go to the mall. I'm not allowed to turn on my phone. All these things that really lock you up today. And by the way, the more options you have, the more Shabbos feels like a prison. It's interesting. In summer camp, when there's really nothing, just you're walking around. So Chilul Shabbos is not as easy, but also the enjoyment of Shabbos is much easier. I imagine I was talking about my sister on the Yeshuv. So there it's a beautiful community. You have shuls, you have a base medrash, you have a park, and you just walk around. And there's no prison, there's no sense. And then once you introduce technology into your life, okay, so you're limitless, right? You can turn on the phone, and you can experience and do anything you want. So now Shabbos becomes that absence of that, and that feels like a prison a little bit.
But in reverse, the technology keeps us in that prison 24/7.
Right.
So the fact is, when you give yourself permission on Shabbos,
that's a way to go free.
Do that.
Absolutely.
It's
I agree, but it takes a special person to see that.
Much more.
It's an age thing also.
You're not.
No, I don't mean old.
She means you're very old.
My children is what I meant. My children are like this. It's this like addiction that they're just like, when a Shabbos over, I'm like, oh, we are so lucky that it's still Shabbos and we're still playing games and we're still I don't know.
Right. I described, I think it was this Shabbos or last Shabbos, that over Shabbos in the hotel there was this. I think I described last week, this family that was sitting in the hallway, and they were all on their devices, like just sitting the whole in the afternoon. It was raining outside. They're sitting. It wasn't from family, and they're sitting, and like the children were playing their games, and the father was in his thing, and the mother was on her phone. And they're sitting in the hallway, plugged in, right? And I remember walking by like 3 hours later, and like right before Havdalah, right, and they were still there. I'm like, oh my gosh, Baruch Hashem, I have Shabbos. So I walk back into the room, and all of a sudden, my whole family's on the devices.
That's hilarious.
Like, so Shabbos is that oasis. It's the okay.
People need that. I think they don't realize.
Yes, very much.
For mental health reasons.
But you can see how one can see it as a prison. Efshar lazuz b'yom hazeh. Hatshuva hi mishum sheShabbos b'chinas Beis HaMikdash. Makom ba'omdim lifnei HaMelech. Be'esrim v'arba shos shel yom HaShabbos anu chayim im HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, the answer to that, as we said earlier, is that we are in the house of God. We are in front of the King. And for 24 hours, we're living with Hashem. And that's actually the opposite of an experience of prison. That's a vacation. That's an oasis. So yeshno davar nosaf. There's an additional layer. Shegami bechinat beit hamikdash bechinat Shabbos u'mashahuva b'shem hazohar shtamid chacham u'bechinat Shabbos. Now we have to understand a maimar in the Zohar. Okay, the Zohar tells us that the Beis Hamikdash, that a Talmid Chacham is like Shabbos. We already know that Beis Hamikdash is like Shabbos. Now we have to understand this idea that Chazal say that the Talmud Chacham is like Shabbos. Why is a Torah scholar like Shabbos? B'dorot hakodmin hayaminag etzel Yehudim shehingia leir Rav Oreach Talmud Chacham Gadol hayohochem lekabels panav b'bigdei Shabbos. There used to be a custom that used to exist that when a scholar would visit a city, a great Chacham would come. So the town would come to receive this Chacham wearing Shabbos clothing, right? You wear respectful clothing. Imagine the president was visiting. You would get dressed. You wouldn't wear your regular Sunday clothing, your jeans. So lo began yafim ela big day Shabbos. It's interesting, not just nice clothing, but actually Shabbos clothing. Lamashal Yehudi Chassid yesh lo straimo yashan noshan osa hu lovesh b'Shabbos yesh lo kova chadash shekana lifnei shavua v'nira yoser mechubad. So he has an older strimel, and then he has a new hat that he purchased, and it looks nicer. V'nei magia Rav Gadol la'ayara Yehudi zeh nigash lekadem es panav keshu lavush im hastrimel. He would wear his Shabbos hat. The strimel is designated for Shabbos. One of the farm stores I was in Geula area had this toy set for kids with dress up for little, and you have every kind of hat that you could try on. Yeah, you have to know which ones and the different lavush. It was good. They were missing like the chiloni and they didn't have the kippah sruga. But he had almost all of them.
Right.
Well, that's whoever made the toy, right? I didn't feel that was a legitimate expression of Judaism. Yeah, all hats come with it in different right? And women don't exist in that world. It's just a boy. It's all. So it's really interesting. I have these books, these incredible books that they have called Yiddish Cup. It means like a Jewish mind, and there's a few volumes now. And they are incredible puzzles. Like try to resolve. The sun is coming from one side. What time of day is it? You have to figure out whether it's time for Mincha next, what time's for Ma'ariv next. They're really phenomenal. But someone pointed out to me, as great as his books are, there's not a single woman in the book at all. They're little girls sometimes, but not a single woman. It's like a whole society of men. It's a strange sort of like reverse Amazon kind of. Like one
of those flyers, we get a little book with the ads in it.
There's no
women.
Right.
Even a wedding.
Yeah.
Where's the color?
When
she wasn't there.
I was at APEC a couple of years ago when APEC used to have these big conferences, and I think Hillary Clinton was speaking. She was wearing a very sharp red dress. I can forget that. So it was noticeable. So because it stood out because most everyone's wearing darker black, blue. And there is a prominent rabbi who knows the Clintons very well, an Orthodox rabbi. So he's standing there to greet her, and as she's walking by, he's not going to reach. She reaches and does that, right? But it was on the Jumbotron. So someone texted me, tomorrow in the TED there's going to be a giant headless red dress kissing Rabbi so-and-so.
And was there?
I mean, I'm sure he's a man. He didn't say, "Get away from me, you filthy." No, he.
They look the best I could.
Yeah. He goes. First of all, these are they're apparently there's a very close relationship with the family. So I assume that they've seen each other before, and this is sort of the parlance of shaking a hand. I don't think that's considered. I'm not poskening in that case, but there are certain cases in which. Look, you try to avoid it. You try not to set yourself up for those situations. Right. But certainly, would that fit derech chiba? No, it's not derech chiba. Someone shakes your hand, a stranger. It's not derech chiba. That's most poskim assume it's not derech chiba. Certainly, it's a hiddur to try to avoid physical contact, of course. And the joke is the yeshiva boys who they go to the supermarket to get change, and they specifically try to get change. But it's not derech chiba. So what are you going to do? Okay. Anyway.
I never heard that.
No, but I think for business purposes, and I'm assuming APEC is somewhat a business situation, and not hugging and all that, but certainly if someone would put out their hand to you, if it was unavoidable, no one would. Not allowed to embarrass them.
Right, you don't want to embarrass people. It's funny. There's a phenomenon. It doesn't happen as often anymore, but it used to be. I joke with some of the rabbis that sometimes you're at a you're at a bar mitzvah, you're at a wedding, and someone will come up to the rabbi, the opposite gender, and they're like talking. But apparently one of the things that you do, I don't know this. I never went to like parties and dancing. That wasn't part of my upbringing. Not that I'm so holy, but we didn't do that. So apparently when you're talking to someone, it's pretty normal to like dance and move to the music while you're talking to someone. So often I'm at a party and someone will be talking to me, they'll start moving like this. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like stuck in this position. I'm like, ah. So you get like frozen, you kind of walk away. Yeah, and they don't realize they're doing that. So anyway, okay, back to the so it happens that a person will come and they'll wear their Shabbos clothing to visit, to meet with this visiting rabbi, Talmid Chacham. Zo inyan miyuchad Talmid Chacham nikra Shabbos. Talmid Chacham is called Shabbos. V'tam davar bezeh Talmid Chacham hu ke'ein beis hamikdash. And the idea is that there's this parallel between a person who possesses a mastery over Torah and the Beis Hamikdash and Shabbos. They're all sort of one and the same. Rashis Nisbon. Let's understand. My Shabbos Kodesh. What is Shabbos? Shabbos hi milashon shavisa. It means to literally to stop. It's a cessation of whatever you were doing. B'shulchan aruch nifsak, and the din is Orach Chaim Siman Shin Vav Samaches LaHalacha v'Yehei Beinav Ki'ilu Kol Malachto Asuya. Here's the attitude you have to have. You should think of it as if all of your work is already finished. I have nothing more to do. So it's not that I'm stopping. It's that I don't have anything more to do. There's nothing more in my mind. So it's also a mental state, right? Imagine you leave work on a Friday and you have so many projects. No, I'm done. There's actually, I don't have to worry about that. So it's a machshava thing to sort of alter when you go into Shabbos. So Mishnah Berurah writes there, Huva Lashon Mechalta, is a beautiful medrash, which is 6 days you will do your work and you will have done all of your work. So what does the Medrash say? How can a person do all of their work in 6 days? Have you ever finished all of your life's projects in 6 days' time? No, there's always what you have to do. And even after 120 years, many of us feel that we haven't accomplished everything we have to accomplish. So what do you mean? 6 days you will finish kol malachtecha, says the Torah. No. Says the Medrash, ela shavus ki'ilu kol malachtecha asuya. When you experience Shabbos, it has to be as if everything else is done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. That's a very high mentality of Shabbos. And that's the Mechelta. That's, by the way, one of the most important midrashim to remember about Shabbos. That Mechelta and Yisro. Now, one time in my life, I saw someone who lived this ideal. What's he talking about? It was 15 years ago. And I was davening in the shul. And Hitzpalel Yehudi Asher Gadol, there was a wealthy Jew davening there. Asher Hichzik Bikaspo Kama Kama Yeshivot. Personally, was supporting many yeshivot with his finances. V'nei Yom Shishi Echad. It was one Friday. Dakot Sefor Lifnei Dalkat Ner. It was a couple of minutes before candle lighting. No dal tsar kalkali kolshu shenakta memshala shebegino hefsido so Asher hon rav. It was discovered that there was some sort of governmental was it seizure? I don't know.
News of a financial step the government had just taken that caused him.
Yeah, now this guy would have lost. He like the biggest loss of money they say ever in history was this week, right? Elon Musk lost $200 million, $200 billion total. I mean, he's still the second, right?
Yeah,
he's still the second richest man in the world. No. There is a relationship. Yes, someone's right. I think. Yeah, I don't think he has a very good relationship. But okay, but I think he's only worth 150 billion now. So he got the news that he lost 200 billion. See, the thing is, he doesn't care. That's the thing about it. He doesn't really care. No, he doesn't care. I don't think he. See, my interpretation is he's from another planet. I don't think that's why he just doesn't care. He thinks about other things. But all right. Look, he's one of those rich people who are trying to solve world problems, which is nice. And the Twitter thing is just a side silly project. But a lot of his ideas are sort of like let's think 40 years ahead, which is really cool. I respect that. But either way, this guy gets the news that he loses a ton of money before Shabbos. Okay. What a disaster, right? What a nightmare. He's takalti Allah b'meshach kol Shabbos. I watched the guy Shabbos davening. Could you imagine what his state of mind was? I've seen people who find out news of a relative passing before Shabbos, and they're in agony all Shabbos long.
Yeah. Well,
so you didn't recognize on his face that there was any pain. He went home, Kiddush, he davened. Looked like all was good, right? As if nothing had happened. After Ma'ariv, he went to his house, Asa Avdallah, and he made Avdallah. Then he started to worry. A simple Jew. He understood and felt this idea of your work is done, therefore you have no worry. You can't worry. It was done. Zui mehusa shel Shabbos bediuk k'mo beis hamikdash lichiyot im Hashem yisparach zeu alev shel am Yisrael. He's saying that clearing your heart completely when you go into the beis hamikdash, not worrying about anything else, right? Not just the special dress, but also the mentality that you are alone with God and there's nothing else in the world that matters now.
Is that for whenever people go to the Beis Mikdash, not like the Kohen Gadol, like us and stuff, we will be inside the Beis Mikdash also?
Yeah, there are different layers, there are different
I remember you saying that like
right, there are different parts of the Beit HaMikdash. Yes, in Shemona Esrei, in our heads we're all in, but none of us here will ever enter the Kadosh Kodesh. Right?
It's
only one person. It's only one person once a year. That's it.
Right.
And that people, there are certain cleaning duties, but they would be in these chambers and suspend like Michelangelo built, painted the Sistine Chapel and the right suspension type of thing. But yeah, none of us would ever enter.
But when we would just go into the parts a week ago, they also were like supposed to clear their minds.
Oh yeah. I mean, in addition to a process of purity, like we can't go to the Beit HaMikdash without making sure we're not Tamei Meis. That means we need the paraduma. It means we need there was a need to go to the mikvah. All that, right?
That's for everyone.
Right. You can't. You have to be. And even the people who go today to Har HaBayis, Machlokes, whether you can, they don't go all the way in. No. They're on the perimeter of Har HaBayis, which is holy as well, right?
You don't go into the first.
No. But one time, my brother and I got lost. My older brother got lost years ago. We got lost in the shuk, and we almost walked into those gates. We didn't realize where we were. Mm-hmm. We were very close. But anyway, okay. So this is a nice idea. But it reminds me as well of a story about that Rav Soloveitchik shares about his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik Zatzal, who, when his father, Reb Chaim Brisker, died. So this is the lineage of Chaim Brisker, right? And then his grandson is Yosef Dov Levi Soloveitchik. So when his father was informed of the passing of his father, he said it was Yontif. And he knew that Yontif mentality dictates you have to be happy. So he said there was absolutely no change, no noticeable change in his demeanor, nothing. He was very close to his father. And after a 2-day Yontif, maybe it was in a 3-day, of just enduring this, of nothing, then the moment Havdalah was recited, he collapsed and he cried and he started to let out a mourn. So if you think about, there's this sort of this delay, but he describes it. The Rav describes it in terms of a tremendous amount of gevura, meaning putting aside your own personal emotions for the sake of a higher mitzvah that you have in the moment. This helps make it a little more human. That sounds superhuman. Yes. This makes it sound like it's that you're finished. There is nothing else that matters at this point. So if you really lived in that world, right? It's like being in Disneyland, right? Everything's magical. There's nothing. Okay, so there's a 5-hour wait for the worst ride in the parks, but it's just it's magical, right? So if you're in this magical place, the worries don't exist. They don't come with you. They shouldn't accompany you. It's a hard thing to strive for.
Well, you would think, like exactly what you're saying, even with a terrible tragedy like that was that Shabbos could really almost act as your private commune with God over this terrible loss. And then once Shabbos was over, you could then commune with other people and go through the rituals, but that was almost maybe a saving for you to not have to deal with it immediately.
So I hear you saying those private, that's private versus the public.
Yes.
That's an interesting ha'ara. I like that. A point. It's an interesting note.
Yeah.
That another difference that you're highlighting, which we haven't seen yet, which is that the individual concerns don't exist on Shabbos because it's not time for the individual.
Right.
Mhm.
I like that.
Yeah.
My mom always says that whenever someone is not sick, like sick, but like when I have a cold, my mom says, "Oh, may Shabbos be a refuge." My mom always says,
Right. The Shabbos itself, right?
yeah.
Okay, so let's go. Ma kavana she'Talmid Chacham b'Bechina Shabbos. What does it mean that Talmid Chacham is Shabbos? Kol prate halachos hanhagos shinstavinu linhug behen beis hamikdash motzim anu osam b'Shabbos Kodesh. All these things we find them on Shabbos. Gam b'Talmid Chacham, even Talmid Chacham b'Shabbos Kodesh yeshnan halachos ketzad aleinu lislavish. Shabbos tells us how to dress. Right? If pasuk in Yeshayahu in Nun Ches is so chevtecha davar davar, that Shabbos tells us that what are your desires, what are the things you speak about, what do you talk about, what do you not talk about, and the concept of something called Shabbos Dik and not Shabbos Dik, that comes from this pasuk. It's not Deoraisa, but it's a Din Derabanan. It fits into the rubric of what we call Kavod and Oneg Shabbos, which is all of those things like, oh, this is how you dress on Shabbos, this is what you eat on Shabbos, this is that you take a nap on Shabbos, you don't talk about business on Shabbos, you don't read the you don't read the stock reports on Shabbos. All of that is mimtzo chaftzachava davar davar. You don't go for a jog on Shabbos, right? You could run to shul because that's cheftzei shamayim. That's what the Gemara says. But you can't run for a stam just to exercise. That's not unless the doctor says you have to be moving because your heart's going to stop because you I don't know what it is, because you took the COVID shot or something. I don't know. So something. Or something, or you were playing football and some 400-pound man ran into your chest. So the other reasons why a person's heart would suddenly stop. So the thing is, I'm not allowed to do things that are cheftzei prati on Shabbos, individual needs. So that's a din from Yeshayahu. Talmid Chacham mechuyav lios lavosh belavosh miyuchad. A Talmid Chacham has to wear special clothing. If you know that you are a person who is held in high esteem, you can't walk around, in a ripped T-shirt and jeans. I remember this guy in the Bronx used to come to shul wearing these inappropriate T-shirts, and he didn't know better. He was a sweet guy. We have great memories of him. But so it was once Tisha B'Av, and he had like a horrible T-shirt on. So the rabbi says, "You really can't be wearing that. You gotta cover that up somehow." So on the spot, he removes his T-shirt, nothing left, and he turns it inside out. Only in the Bronx. So
my parents are bragging about my parents. They're big in the community, and my dad, who doesn't know anything about like materialistic stuff like that, he can't even really see it. And he was driving this like 1980 banged up old Toyota Corolla stick shift thing. And the rabbi actually one day, this is when I was a kid, went up to him and said, "You need to
upgrade.
You need to get really better." Yeah, he said, it's not appropriate for your status, and there's something like that. And he said, you should maybe think about.
Okay.
Something like that. This is when I was young, so I could be saying the story wrong, but something like how you should be more
respectful of yourself.
Yeah, something like that.
You have to respect yourself. And part of lavush, clothing, it doesn't mean that you have to shop at the most expensive shops, but it means you should dress properly. This is din Talmid Chacham shouldn't have stains like on their shirt and things like that. Gam tzuras adibur, Talmid Chacham, also the way Talmid Chacham speaks, tzuras achilaso, how they eat should be different. You don't see Rav Avigdor Nebenzahl with a slice of pizza folded over and walking down the street. It just doesn't. Now, is there anything wrong with it? No. I mean, if I ate a piece of pizza and I was sitting on the side, it would be okay, right? I probably, as a rabbi, probably shouldn't walk around holding a pizza and walking around taking a bite. I don't know if anyone should be. Just not a mental thing to do. So we have to think about this constantly. Mehudi she'enu Talmid Chacham v'Rambam, and this is the Rambam describes this in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that when you embody Torah, you claim to embody Torah, you have to worry about appearances. It sounds almost superficial, but it's true.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a halacha.
Yeah, and we should all try to. Of course.
I remember when many years ago, when the kids, people went to the yeshiva, and they'd wear white shirts. They're always wrinkled and dirty, and suit, and people used to make such fun of, like, is that
what you want to
do? Is that what you aspire to be somebody,
right?
Like that? And,
I think it was Bialik's poem, The Masmid, describes a person in a disparaging term, sitting in the disheveled clothing in an old base medrash with broken windows and books that were tattered. And he had this image of, I guess, yeshiva as being
like that.
That it looked like that. Yeah. And it's funny because today, because of a lot of the money behind it, you look at the Bati Midrashos and they're beautiful, and they have these like porcelain washing bowls that are always so fancy, and this it's almost a little bit ostentatious sometimes, and it's the opposite, which is a different issue. But I think that was the reputation that he had. That's the notion he had of what the Torah experience was like. You're walking around, your clothing are not nice, you have dandruff on your shoulder, and there's all sorts of like. So yeah, you represent it.
It up and they've done a good job.
Yeah. I mean,
like the rabbi says, now it's sort of turned a little the other way, and it's
right.
It's a little
well, it is. It's still fancy.
Trendy,
probably like community based.
Right. Yeah. Fancy belt buckles and ties.
Different.
Well, you know why in the yeshiva world they have the coolest belt buckles, ties, glasses, and shoes.
That's the only thing you can be different. Yeah,
that's right. Different. Right.
And the girls too. The biggest thing for the girls is socks and shoes. They're all wearing the uniforms, but you see, a different color, pattern socks.
Yeah.
And
cool.
Where you can express your.
Well, advanced saying exactly. Seminary girls. I mean, I never thought I would say that about, but they do.
Well, outfits.
The same hairstyle. They all wear the same clothing, and it's really hard to tell the difference right away. They all.
Yeah. Well, marrying the same gene pool for hundreds of years. So,
but also this should show us like
That's why Israel's great, because you're going to see the next generation. People actually going to look different than each other, which is beautiful, right? Sephardim, Ashkenazim, you have people from every country in the world, right? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I feel like this encompasses a lot of stuff, because if we're trying to be like a Talmid Chacham and somebody who's a leader of our nation, those people aren't the ones who are like, oh, I'm not worthy. Like, they know their self-worth. They know that it's self-care. It's just, it's like encompassing a lot of factors of why you should dress and look the same.
Absolutely. But you're saying there's
I think there's a lot of good reasons why we should try and be like this. Not,
absolutely. Yeah. Kol ze novea me'achumra gedola shel Talmid Chacham v'shem shebeis hamikdash histia hakala biyoter manhaga haruya sham mehava ason kshem sheb'Shabbos Kodesh hataus hakatan biyosef mechai b'skila gam kein Talmid Chacham. Just as a small mistake in the Beis Hamikdash can cause a grave problem, right? If you eat the wrong places, the wrong things, you think the wrong things in the Beis Hamikdash, it can be punishable in terrible ways. All I did was I thought about the wrong carbon, but that's considered a grave error in the Beis Hamikdash. So too, a mistake on Shabbos, it's a small miscalculation. A little toes can be devastating, can bring skila, a death punishment. So too, Talmid Chacham, kol Talmid Chacham shenimsa revav al bigdo. Talmid Chacham has a stain on his clothing. Chayav misa, says the Gemara. It's chayav death. Madua. Why? Right. Ma'asona norai mishal bigdo ketem kolshu. What? How bad is the shiv ketem? One of my caricatures, one of my rebbeim used to have. I used to put a coffee stain on his shirt when I drew the character. I don't know why. Hatshuva he Talmid Chacham he b'chinat Shabbos. Talmid Chacham is like Shabbos. B'chinat Beit Hamikdash lo mei Torah Hashem. Now, Beit Hamikdash. Leiv shel ha'olam, it's the heart of the world. Shabbos Kodesh is the leiv of the mitzvos, the heart of the mitzvos. And Torah, Hakadosh, the Torah that person embodies, on the long dimu leiv v'amach shel Am Yisrael, is the heart and the mind of the Jewish people. Therefore, Talmid Chacham nemru halachos miuchados. That's why they have special laws. Ela shekan aleinu lisponin ma'at ma'u Talmid Chacham k'dei lahavin zos nakdim v'nevar inyan beis hamikdash. So, in order to really understand this, we have to understand what is a Talmid Chacham. Shabbos Kodesh Bechinas Beis Hamikdash Bayis Shel Kedusha. Shabbos is a house of holiness. L'shem matzrichin bayis. What do you need a house for? The Gemara says, "Loke Avram shekos bahar shneimar asher ye'amar hayom bahar Hashem yira'eh lo Yitzchak shekos basada shneimar yetze Yitzchak vasuch basada ela ki Yaakov shenigru bayis So the famous Madrash tells us that by Avram the word mountain is used, by Yitzchak the word sada is used, field, and by prayer of Yaakov the word bayit is used, house. Right. So each one has a different. There's a wealth of drushos you could do on the difference between a mountain, a field, and a house. So pashut lekulam shet kasher efshar livnot berachov begina o bepark kitzarch pratiut. That you can't just build something in the street, in a garden, or in a park, right? You need pratiot, what plans? Privacy. If you establish, you set up shop in the street, imagine you said, okay, I'm gonna camp out in the street, right? There's a whole movement. What do we do when there's a homeless crisis? Do we help them out? Do we try to find someone there? There's extreme positions to say, no, you must institutionalize others. There's extreme positions to say, no, you have to acknowledge this is your house. You live in a tent under the subway system. That's also a house. That's another lifestyle, right? So there's all questions of what we do about that problem, right? Right? Do you discourage people from living on the streets by putting these little bars on every bench so that nobody can be comfortable? You've seen those, right? Or do you say, no, this is empathy, right? You have to have sympathy. But the point is that at least what we do know is that if you do set up shop in the street as a lechachila, you're not going to. It's not conducive to a life of being a chacham. You'd have to be. Ooh, that's a brilliant person, right? It's not like some exotic sort of recluse who lives that kind of mentality. Living in the street is a tough life. So that person's not going to become Talmid Chacham. It's going to be hard to be Yer Shamayim. El Shesavra Avram Avinu she'lehasagas pratius bein am Yisrael avim sh'shayim maspik lalot al har gavoa. Avram thought, in order to encounter God, ascend a mountain. Right? You can imagine this journey up to a mountaintop, right? Like as a spiritual journey. Right? I think some of the religions in Africa choose mountaintops as their places for meditation for the various monks and things like that. There's that will never be aired again. There was an old Simpsons episode where Homer goes on this journey to see the very first owner of the Quickie Mart. So he travels to some So he goes to India, some to the Himalayas, and he travels up to this mountain after many months of hiking, and you're entitled 3 questions, and that's it. So he says to the guy, he goes, "Are you really the first owner? Is this really the first Quickie Mart?" He goes, "Yes." Homer goes, "Really? Yes. Really? Yes. Thank you. Come again." Those are his 3 questions. So he blew his 3 questions. But anyway, that's one notion of a har gavoa, of a tall mountain. Lead not take mitumas olam, because you're separate from the impurities of the world. I can be with God. That's one idea of spirituality. This is a profound. By the way, what you're seeing here is great drush. The Medrash just tells us Avram had a mountain, Yitzchak has a field, and Yaakov has a house. Right, so now let's see what we do with it. Yitzchak comes and says, Harino maspik. A mountain is not enough to encounter God. What don't you have on a mountain? People, community, friends, chesed, tzedakah. You don't have all the nice things that community brings when you're on a mountain alone, living as a hermit. Aval sof kol sof, zeh shetach hefker, shkol mi sherotz yachol ikanes sham. So he's saying that's actually a good thing in this case. There's not a lot of people, but in the end of the day, anyone who wants to go can climb the mountain, right? It's a public park. In a field, shetach prati, which is a private property. Where does Yitzchak encounter God? Where does he talk to God? He davens mincha in a field. You need privacy. Yaakov thought, I could do better than that. Even the privacy that's afforded to a person in a field, it's not enough to fashion the relationship you have to have with God. Real privacy, house. It's got, I guess, the walls, right? It holds it in. The only way to get into the house is to knock on the door. Even if the door is not locked, You know it's a private property, and you're not allowed to just walk in unless you knock. You have to have permission from the owner. We're not like Avram who calls it a mountain, not like Yitzchak who calls a relationship with Hashem a Sadeh, El Ki Yaakov Shkar Bayis. Rather, which is the optimal relationship with God? In the house. Yaakov Chidish Davar Me'od Chashuv. He gave us a new idea that was very important that nobody else knew. When you want to create a relationship of connection with Hashem and Am Yisrael, lo maspika dveikut levad. It's not enough to be connected. Hadvekut hazu tzricha pratiut, it needs privacy. Pratiut muchletet, a decisive privacy. Lo ke Avram shkara har, not like Avram is a mountain. Lo Yitzchak shkaro sada, a field. Lo ke Yaakov shkara bayis, but rather like Yaakov. The base of Mikdash umakam bochayinu yachad imakad baruch b'kedusha v'tara. So ya base of Mikdash zeu inyana shel Shabbos Kodesh. Yom shel yichud imakad baruch v'zeu gamitzias shel Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chacham is also a private entity. What's interesting is that we have today a common phenomenon that people share their worlds online. Right? Here's my lunch, and here's my breakfast, and here's what I did this, and here's my feet on a vacation when I'm sitting by the beach, and here's a lot of apparently you don't really have to go on vacation, just take a photo of your feet. And
do that on my next trip. Yeah,
just your feet. Here's my feet on the New York subway. No. So that's taking your private life and sharing it with the world. That's the opposite of Kedusha, right? It's the opposite. It's what Bilam, when he blesses the Jewish people and curses them, he says, "Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkanosecha Yisrael." He blessed them, and the Chazal say their homes, their windows were not aligned. So when you beat one house, you wouldn't look right across the street, into the other house across the street. You would have staggered homes. Right. Like Skokie built every entrance originally in the 50s was built on the side of the homes. Right. So it's weird to people, but it's actually comes from a good place, right? There's a certain privacy there. The giant windows in front.
On the side, and your neighbors is on the side. You can look into there.
Yeah, if they both enter on the same side, right? Okay, so but that's an important idea, and I think we'll stop here, and I'll share maybe something